And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk, Michigan State, number 16 team in the country, blows out Washington 88-54. Many of you saw that. Some of you were here. Many of you were here. The old Zone was here. They were great. A lot of you might have been channel surfing back and forth with the football game. If you didn't see all of it, Michigan State dominated TKO all 40 minutes. I'll tell you what, Paul, at the Underground Bunker message board, the Final Forum message board, we have the in-game thread. And when it was 12-1, I said, I don't remember ever feeling this way about a Big Ten basketball game that Michigan State was playing in, but I said, this game is over. It was 12-1, but more importantly, you could just see the quickness with which Michigan State was operating, and there was a sharpness, and Washington was just slower and sloppy. And usually, you can still win if you're slow, but the thing was over. And pretty soon the score indicated that from start to finish, Michigan State was pretty good. So now we come on to this wondering exactly how good is Michigan State? What's the record? 13-2. They've won, 7 straight. The schedule, we've talked about the schedule. They haven't been challenged a whole lot. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But your thoughts about this game and as we look bigger picture going forward.
How good is Michigan State will be answered this weekend at Northwestern, the team that plays really good defense, that does a great job of taking away transition from Michigan State and has beat Michigan State handily on its own floor several times in the recent years. So I knew coming into this game, and I've told you a couple times when I watched Washington that I hadn't been impressed with them. They've got some decent individual pieces that put up decent numbers and look good in some games, like Great Asabor. He's got the name and he's got the reputation, but he's not great by any stretch of the imagination in terms of what it takes to win. And, they've got a McDonald's All-American, Azum Diallo, and I felt like he's a guy that actually cared tonight. I mean, he was the guy trying to get people fired up, but it's a team that's a rebuilding. It's a complete rebuild that Danny Sprinkle took over. And I know everyone thinks because you have the transfer portal and you pay $2 million for the big guy, Great Asabor, that they should be better than they were. And I don't care what they did against Illinois. And I don't, they beat Maryland, but that's a mark on those teams. I knew, knowing what Michigan State does, how Michigan State plays ball, how Michigan State gets up and down the floor, how bad Washington is at transition defense, how bad Washington is at ball screen defense, that, Michigan State should win this game comfortably. Now, that doesn't mean that you got a puncher's chance a lot of times, but not with the way they play defense. The defense that Washington played is the worst in the Big Ten, not even close. I mean, there's nobody in the Big Ten that plays worse defense than Washington, in my opinion. And Minnesota's a better team. Minnesota competes harder. A lot of these teams compete harder, and I was more impressed with what Michigan State did on the road last weekend at Ohio State than I was with a 30-point win over this Washington team that I think is flawed. My question with this is, Michigan State's had a win like this before in Big Ten play against a Nebraska team that I still think is pretty good. I think that win was more impressive because I respect the heck out of what Fred Hoiberg does. I think he's got a veteran team. I think he's got a good team. He's got a team with flaws, but this was impressive because Michigan State executed their game plan because they didn't let up off the gas. They took advantage of Washington's flaws, and it was also impressive because the alumni zone. It was a good night and a good experience. But for me, Michigan State, I'm convinced are they a top 25 team? I completely believe they are. I will know more about whether they are legit, conference contender if they can go into Northwestern this weekend and take care of business because they want this win at Northwestern. They have a short turnaround, and Chris Collins is a heck of a defensive coach.
Yeah, and the 37-point win against Nebraska and whatever this was, 34 or whatever, I'm wondering if I'm starting to, and home games winning at home means a little less. Crowd was great, but when you start beating teams by 30, a couple times in the Big Ten, I start wondering if I'm not giving Michigan State enough credit because you can be pretty good and still have a hard time beating teams by more than 20, 25, 30. Nebraska's had a couple of good wins. I have no idea how Washington played Illinois so well. I watched part of that game, but not all of it, considering but this Washington team might have been different tonight. Maybe the crowd freaked them out a little bit. They're a first-year program, new coach, a lot of new players. And out there in the West Coast, the crowds have been really small.
I agree.
They come in here, 15,000 people. Izzo had a funny line. He said, I almost felt sorry for Washington because they probably thought they were coming in here without the students being here. And it turns out the replacement students, the Izzo alums, might have been better than the usual zone. I don't know if you'd agree with that or not, but Jace Richardson said it was the best crowd he's ever played in front of. Now, he's a freshman. He hasn't been around the block a whole lot, but Izzo was like emotional about how good the zone were. So maybe that knocks Washington down a peg. The coach, Danny Sprinkle, said, we just didn't compete. Michigan State sure competed. And Michigan State on defense, setting the tone, tenacity, ball pressure on the perimeter. Jeremy Fears doing it. That's why when it was 12-1, I'm like, Washington has no answer for this. Michigan State was playing some half-court pressure defense on ball screens, good switching, good communication, taking things away. Michigan State looked like some of those Duke teams we've seen, except Michigan State wasn't hitting shots from deep. But that defensive tenacity reminded me of some of the Duke teams that we've seen deliver TKOs to people.
In the rebounding piece, I think that was really good. The one thing that I think that I don't – see, here's what I don't know about Washington. I think that their big man, Great Osborne, he's got really good assist numbers. And I think they do their best against teams that double the post. And Michigan State didn't double the post, didn't have to double the post. That dude that looks like the world's biggest homeschooler that was at Nebraska last year, Bryden, whatever his name is. But he's a guy that's gotten, because people double the post.
Wilhelm Breidenbach?
Yeah.
6'10", power forward.
But he's a guy that gets a lot of open shots. I've seen a couple of their games, and there's a lot of other guards that get open shots because people tend to double the post, because that Great Osborne is like their big scoring threat. He's a good passer. Michigan State didn't double the post, and they really contested everything. But I think like Jackson Kohler, his ability to rebound, all the bigs. The bigs expended a lot of energy. You saw like Shimon Zapala was like winded and sweating, and he was working his tail off. But all those bigs did a really good job cleaning the glass, but challenging in space, moving their feet in space, and I just think Michigan State didn't give up a whole lot. They were in that playbook. The one thing that they had, Washington had going for them against Illinois is Illinois, with the way they play some of that drop coverage, that elbow's open, and that DJ Davis, the Butler transfer, that had 31 points in that game. Well, I think a lot of his points came on those one dribble pull up type shots, and he's not getting that against Michigan State. And
Michigan State doesn't play drop coverage
right, at all. And the thing that I was really impressed with is he came off the bench. DJ Davis did in this game, and I'm not sure if he did against Illinois or not. I can't remember. I'm assuming maybe he did, but they wanted to isolate him on, Jace Richardson, and I thought Jace Richardson played fantastic perimeter defense, and he's a guy that, has high basketball IQ. He knows where he's supposed to be, but he's getting better on defense, and Jeremy Fears continues to get better on defense. Trey Holloman, he played good defense, and you've got a lot of different pieces for Michigan State. Cohen Carr continues to play better on-ball defense, and not just coming out of nowhere and blocking a shot, but
you knew he had it in him.
Yeah, but we didn't know, because of that kind of athlete, whether like he's never had to move his feet a ton on the perimeter, and so all these guys are getting better defensively, and I talked afterwards to a couple of guys in the locker room, but I talked to Jaden Akens about defense, and I'm like, is that one of the biggest differences between this year and last year with those three guards in the starting lineup, but you got guys coming off the bench? And he's like, yeah, we feel like we take a lot of pride in our defense, and we feel like we can lock a lot of guys down. And you saw that with Washington having different sized players. They've got a McDonald's All-American. He's 6'4", 185, but he's a big kid. And then they got a 6'8" guard, but he got locked down. And you saw a lot of guys challenging him defensively and turning good, solid position defense into offense. And the way Michigan State rebounded in the first half, the way they played, contested everything, not a surprise to me that they got transition going, but they also just drove to the basket. There's a reason why every single guard that is in the regular rotation had over 10 points in this game, and a lot of it was because of drives to the basket. Now, I don't want to rip on Washington too much, but the guys that I talked to in the locker room, they knew that they could exploit some of that ball screen defense, and there would be drives to the basket in this game. And I predicted as much in my preview that there would be more drives to this game in this game because of the slowness of their bigs, because of questionable defense all around. Michigan State would get more stuff to the basket in this game, and they got more in this game than they have in any other Big Ten game. And some of it was like cuts to the basket and finishing at the rim, but some of it was drives to the basket. And Jeremy Fears did a great job, but all those guards did a great job of getting downhill and attacking. They got a lot of points at the rim, and part of it was because of the lack of fleet-footedness that Washington has in the bigs. They can't get out on the perimeter. So, when people are talking about NIL and stuff, Great Osborne gets paid $2 million a year. But I think one of the things that people tend to forget.
We know that for a fact.
Yeah, it's pretty much well reported. But I think a lot of these guys out there, a lot of these big time scorers that people pay a ton of money for, a lot of these guys aren't moving their feet very well, and and with what they want him to do and what he wants to do as far as handling the ball and bringing it up the court sometimes, and trying to run the offense through him, like a guy that like that. You got to take breaks somewhere, and he does it on defense. Michigan State exploited it, but transition, defense, energy, toughness, all the hustle things, and that's where I think the ISO crowd was amazing, because I feel like these guys that have been around for a while in the ISO, the veterans, you get more of a cheer for when a guy gets on the ground for a floor burn. When a guy like Jace Richardson got his shot blocked but ran it back down or something. Or he had a turnover. He runs on the floor in transition, beats the guy down on the floor, takes the ball back. You got the alumni ISO just cheering their tails off because they appreciate those hustle, toughness, those hard plays, those gritty, dirty plays that made this program what it was. And I think that's kind of where, in games like this, the alumni game, those kind of things feed off each other because these guys appreciate that, and the players fed off it, man. They wanted to be the next guy that did the hustle play.
Jeremy Fears, 12 points, 10 assists. First time he's had a double-double, only one turnover. And he was doing a lot of directing on defense, too. He's doing more and more of that. He's moving well on defense. And the team defense is gaining more traction. I was wondering about Osabor, 0 for 8 from the field, didn't have a field goal. And Sprinkle said, well, when you're missing those layups, whatever. But I came into this game wondering whether 6'8" Osabor, wide body, whether he would be affected by Michigan State's rim protection. Rim protection at Michigan State is not something we talked about for the last 2 or 3 seasons, and I'm wondering if they've got legit rim protection this year. Apollo's a legit 7-footer, and Kohler's active and he plays hard and he clears the glass and he goes and sits down, so he knows that he's got people coming in for him. Cooper comes in. Cooper was their best defender each of the last 2 years among big people in terms of consistency. Now he's playing fewer minutes because the other guys are playing better, so when he comes in, he's all riled up, ready to go. We saw Cooper in practice a few days ago. It was the most intensity I've ever seen from Carson Cooper in practice. He wants more minutes. He's working at it. There's people in front of him doing a good job. So I was wondering if Osabar would run into some aircraft carrier problems in terms of depositing it into the rim. And I think Michigan State has some goalies now. And I'm not saying they're Hakeem Olajuwon, but better than they've had in the past. And that pairs well with some of the perimeter defense they're getting. And they're getting consistency. Izzo says he wants consistency from the team. Earlier in the year, they had trouble shooting. At least it was consistent. But the consistency is something he's beginning to appreciate, wants more of, because yesteryear, during the Hogarth era, the consistency was up and down in a lot of ways. How prepared are they? How much are they listening in meetings? How much of this? How much of that? He's appreciating this part along with the depth. And it's pretty good that, Frankie Fiddler he's been slumping all year. His minutes are down to 9 minutes a game. If you're not going to be better than that, you can't play because everybody else is that good. Kurtang got in today with about 9 or 10 minutes to go. He's a good player. Hard to get him on the court, though. So I don't know when Michigan State has had, 12, 13 guys, 12 guys that are this solid. McCulloch is good. He's redshirting, but it's a good group for Michigan State. Maybe they don't have any first-round draft choices as they are right now, but it's a good group that gets along well. Izzo's appreciating that. And today, TKO for 40 straight minutes.
Yeah, and the thing about Osabor is he's 6'8", he's big, and he's got pretty good feet, but he's got really long arms. And that's something I thought, sometimes those guys can be problems. But one of the things that Washington does a nice job of, too, is they usually get some more penetration from some of their guards. And they're able to draw, when they're able to draw defenders, they're able to find him underneath or whatever. None of that stuff was there. There wasn't a lot of the cheap cleanup stuff that he gets used to. And
I tell you what, Washington also was getting a little chippy. Like when they're getting blown out and they know they're not going to win. They're competitors. They probably thought they could make a comeback at some point. But when you're getting just humiliated and all this noise, some of the contact, there's a little too much contact. You're trying to get it back in other areas. And I was concerned for Michigan State's sake that this could get a little bit ugly in that regard. And with the crowd and everything, they started yelling at each other. They really were outclassed today, and it was interesting to watch.
Well, I think there's a dynamic issue. I wrote this, and when I do the 3 things to watch, I got to be careful of what I write, and a lot of it was coded. But I think one of the things I noticed is they've got a McDonald's All-American point guard who's very vocal today, and he was really upset. And he got a couple of his fouls that he was called for were because bigs didn't do their job. And he got saddled with a foul. There's one time where Osborne yelled at him after Osborne messed up a coverage, and Zoom Diallo was the one that got called for the foul, and he was getting yelled at because he gave up a basket. And he's like, no, that's your – I mean, so it was getting nasty out there. But the thing that they've got – one of the things that Washington has a problem with, I don't want to talk about Michigan State, but Osborne's the guy that leads them in assists. He wants to be the guy that they run everything through. I get it, but you've got guards that are actually – some of these guys are somewhat athletic. You're seeing like –
Michigan State took them out of their game.
They did.
Defense and the film study, players into their film, into their playbook took Washington out of their game.
And then the other thing is the transition. Like the thing that I told you, I think, and I told Jake Liskow this a couple times when I watched Washington. The worst thing that they do as a team is when they get back in transition, they're not in the right position. A lot of times they're looking in the wrong place, or they're just kind of jogging back. And Michigan State just exploited that over and over again. Where, and it's gonna. I don't know. Like if they had any gains last week from playing well against Maryland and Illinois, all those gains are down the drain and they're back at square one. But for Michigan State, this is kind of what you want to see, and you want to see that if Michigan State is a competitor, is going to be there competing for the regular season championship in the Big Ten, and I think they've shown me enough where I think they're going to be in the mix.
The schedule's been weak. It's been weaker than usual.
Yeah, it has, but
these blowouts make me wonder.
They make me wonder as well. But you also have 2 road wins. This is only the second home game. So and I think Michigan State has played. They've been competitive. Like the North Carolina game to me showed me that they've got Michigan State's defensive guards are fast enough and to handle most everybody. But turns out North Carolina's not very good. No, but they do have some athletes. That's what I'm talking about. Like there's no like last year if AJ Hoggard was playing that game, and I know some people like AJ Hoggard out there on their Final Four message board. That's great, but if AJ Hoggard was playing, he'd have one good defensive game and 3 really bad ones. Michigan State, North Carolina might not be very good, but they've got great athletes, and Michigan State has an athletic backcourt that can do a lot of different things versatility-wise on defense, and they've also got a bunch of guys that are doing their best to be the best versions of themselves. Like Jackson Kohler continues, to be more versatile as a defender than I ever expected him to. Checking Devin Royal, 6'6" guy, against Ohio State, and then going and banging bodies with Osborne tonight. Carson Cooper's kind of the X factor, and I really liked what I saw from him in terms of what can Michigan State moving forward. But I'll tell you what, against the big dude from Northwestern, the guy from Clarkston, that's going to be a problem. The 7-footer. Nicholson is another kind of animal. He's
put on some bulk too this year.
And he's mean. I mean, he's a guy that's going to go after and scrap and claw for everything. And
I respect that.
Yeah, I do too. I think he's a heck of a player, and he's going to have a chip on his shoulder as he should, being an in-state kid. That's a lot different challenge than going up against what they face tonight. So, there's a lot of 20 teams in the Big Ten. There's going to be a lot of different styles of play and whatnot. But Michigan State, I think that the depth is there, obviously, but the versatility and the fact that these guys are learning how to play with each other and accepting that they have roles. Like some nights, it might not be the best matchup for one guy, but they are for another. And these guys are playing for each other, and that's not lip service. The good chemistry thing in the locker room, it's a real deal. These guys like each other, and you can tell when guys don't like each other or are uncomfortable about during interviews saying the wrong thing with the person at the locker next to them. These guys aren't, and they're having fun. That's what I've never heard Jaden Akens say throughout his career so many times. Is that he said this year, I'm having fun. Even during the tough times, he's having fun, and that's a big deal. Yeah, and he had fun tonight. After one of the 3-pointers, he went back up court, like getting the crowd imploring them to make more noise, and smiling on the court. Izzo doesn't like a lot of showboating. He doesn't want to disrespect the opponent, that type of thing. Let it go with Akens because he needs to get some of that, get some of the bad juice from early in the season out of him, and become more of a guy who's having fun. And maybe that can get him loose a little bit more. They need him to be a 40% 3-point shooter. This team could take a step if he can become a reliable 40% shooter, which he's been earlier in his career. He has been in Big Ten play. He's right around. I don't know what he shot tonight. I don't know. 1 of 3 maybe. But he's 42% coming in Big Ten games. So that's so that's quiet. It's quiet. Like I wrote the story earlier this week, and people are going to be rewriting that story after tonight about is Jaden Akens that guy. He's been really consistent for Michigan State in terms of the last 5 or 6 games, and it's kind of hard. They don't need a Tyson Walker. They don't need a volume shooter. Jaden Akens has taken 10 shots a game, people.
He looked less stiff today. There's been a stiffness to his game through his career. He's talented. He works hard, but just doesn't have that natural fluidity. Today, maybe because the defense was so bad, but the way he was, stopping and going and finishing with some double clutch and some scoop layups, there was some dexterity there.
He's had a few times. I think he's starting to get confident, but he's had a few times in transition lately that he's done some things, and he's done a lot of like those pull up elbow jumpers, and he's had a lot more of those.
Today.
We talk about what he hasn't done, and when a guy has a hard start to a season. And it's easy to kind of overlook and say, oh, he can't do this or he can't do that. But quietly, he's had more clutch shots where you don't really notice him because Michigan State ends up winning by 10 or more.
Big win at Ohio State with a minute and 50 to go.
But you got whatever it is, they're up by 5 or the other team's making a little mini run with a 5-point run, and then he's had a lot of those shots where he steps up, hits a mid-range or hits a three. And I think he's getting comfortable because he knows that he doesn't need to be that Tyson Walker, and he doesn't want to be Tyson Walker. I think Jaden Akens wants us to be a team. He wants to be able to show people what he can do, but he doesn't want to do it at the detriment of his team. And I think that's Jaden Akens isn't Tyson Walker, but I think he can do more all around things in terms of defense, being a leader that people listen to, rallying people together. And the other thing he's doing a lot better is I don't know how many times he went to the free throw line tonight. But he shot, getting close to 50 free throws on the season, which is way higher than he did, last year. So he
2 of 2 tonight.
So he is
only attempted 17 all of last year, right?
So I think he had, I might be wrong, but I think he had 33 made free throws coming into this game tonight. And
different role. He's allowed to. I mean, he's in the system. He's driving more than last year. That wasn't part of what he was supposed to do. That's what Walker and Hogard were for.
And he's doing a great job in defense. It's not like his defensive performances are pretty much consistent from game to game, and he's able to guard different types of players. Like Tyson Walker was a heck of a defender, and I thought he was underrated as a defender. But there's just some guys that he couldn't guard. Mm-hmm. Jaden Akens is 6'4", so he can guard different guys. Trey Holloman. I talked about the defensive guard thing. He's got big. He's 6'2", but he's got like a 6'8" wingspan. He's got long arms, and he knows how to use them. He's stronger this year. And then, Jeremy Fears is just, I think he's getting his legs back, and he's becoming a really good defensive player.
And Michigan State with the schedule. In the past, when Izzo scheduled really hard and taken a bunch of losses, he always just used to say, this helps us know what we have to get better at. It makes our team tougher. It's better for the long run. And that was great when you knew you were going to win 22, 25 games anyway and get in the tournament. The last couple of years, they've been borderline getting in. So the schedule, we've already talked about that. But back then when they used to lose games and schedule really hard, back before the Big Ten went to 20 games regular season, he used to say, yeah, we're getting better. Our record is 7-5. We're losing a lot of games, but I wonder about our lack of confidence because we're losing a lot of games and our guys start to lack confidence. So there was a little bit of a positive and negative and all of that. This year with this team, 13-2, they've not been tested as much schedule-wise, but the confidence is pretty high, and that can do some good things for you also, and helps you get more productive practices and film study if you impress upon them that. Like Izzo's saying, he wants to make sure they don't get too high on themselves. But the confidence is good, something the program hasn't had the last couple of years at this point in the season. So the confidence is there. This weekend against Northwestern, Northwestern's 10-5, 1-3 in the Big Ten. Lost at Penn State by 4, lost to Iowa by 1, lost to Butler by 2, lost to Dayton by 5. Beat Illinois, beat Georgia Tech, beat DePaul by 20. Most recently, lost to Purdue by 18. Then they have a week off. And Izzo was talking about, hey, we got 2 days to prepare. And I'm telling you what, Paul, that game was over, and the assistant coaches for Michigan State were into Northwestern film immediately after the game's over. They're up there right now. It's Northwestern prep time right now because they got to come back tomorrow and have game plan prep because you have 2 practices to get ready for a road game against a team, like you said, that has beaten Michigan State a lot down there, that has had a week off. Michigan State put a lot into the film study to tangle with Washington today. Of course, you're not looking ahead to Northwestern at all. Northwestern prep began the minute this game was over, and it's going on right now as we get to midnight with the assistant coaches up there.
The thing that I like about this team as opposed to last year's team is I feel like there's some guys on that team that would have come off a 30-point win like this or a win against Nebraska earlier in the year, and they would have been feeling way too good about themselves, like they've arrived. And I think Izzo, he can talk glowingly about his team tonight, and those guys aren't going to be, as full of it because they've been through some things, and they don't want to be like some of the recent teams at Michigan State. The other thing is that these teams are constructed differently. You're not as reliant on perimeter scoring. You're not as reliant on like setting, ball screens and having a guard do some things. There's different ways to get it done. And Michigan State's also a better rebounding team, so they're getting more opportunities. Obviously, the depth that we talked about, which leads to more runouts, and Michigan State's playing faster. But
and the drive was working, and the fast break was working, so Michigan State didn't have to do any post entries today. Zapawa was coming off 15-point game against Ohio State, but not many post entries because Michigan State never got to that point in their offensive sets usually.
Yeah, and you know
what? Other things were working.
The nice thing about that too is you talk about like that, and the bigs maybe not having to score as much, but at the same time you've got guys rebounding their butts off. Like Kohler
defensive boards.
He's been awesome, and because he got clean defensive rebounds. There's a point where I think Washington really wanted to, contest the glass because they know Michigan State can get out and run. But there's a point where Michigan State was getting so many rebounds and they're so physical rebounding that Washington just kind of quit on going after some of that stuff. So
they're trying to get back on defense, which
so those are
one hand washes the other in that whole thing.
Those are all good things, but it's hard to get a feel for where Michigan State's at. I like where Michigan State's at, but it's hard to get a feel for where anyone's at. Like you look at a team like Iowa, I know that they don't play well on defense, but one night, they're giving up 126 points to Wisconsin.
What is going on?
And then Wisconsin.
What did Wisconsin make? 21 3-pointers that day?
Yeah, and then Wisconsin's been up and down. Like Ohio State losing by 30 points to Maryland, and then Maryland losing to this Washington.
And Ohio State beating Kentucky by 20.
And I just feel like there's a lot of I've said this before in a couple of VCasts, but I'm going to say it again. I feel like there's a lot of teams in the Big Ten that are good, that are solid, but they have exploitable flaws. And I think Michigan State is maybe not as much in that class as they've been in the last couple of years. They've got more guys that can do more things and more guys that have worked to get rid of the flaws in their game, and I think they work well together. And I think they enjoy playing together, and it's kind of a fun thing to watch. And I do think obviously these guys are fresh. So going back to the Nebraska game at the beginning of the Big Ten play, one of the reasons why Tom Izzo was so worried about it is that Nebraska had a week to prepare for Michigan State. That's a Nebraska team that supposedly has better depth than they had last year. So they had a week to prepare for Michigan State. Michigan State had one really good day to prepare for Nebraska after giving their guys rest. And so there's a lot of concern of that type of thing. Michigan State's shown that they can play well in a short period of time because I think they've got a lot of guys working together. It'll be interesting to see how they handle Northwestern because of Jeremy Fears. He hasn't played Northwestern before, and some of the things that they do defensively. Now, they don't have Boo anymore, but some of the things that they do defensively, schematically, are frustrating to a lead guard. So I'm going to be interested to see how he handles that because it's
a different coverage, all those blur screens and all the things they do.
And Northwestern is as good a defensive team schematically as there is in the conference. They might not always have the talent, but when they do a great job of taking away what Michigan State wants to do, especially there.
And we'll see if Michigan State's defense travels, if it's good enough to travel. It's been pretty good. And Michigan State's team defense collectively, because of the depth and people really going and getting after it, and that defense, like Izzo said, at the tip of the spear, your point guard's getting out on it and into the playbook and into the film study. That defense... We'll find out if that carries over. Northwestern will do some tricky things.
And they've got some weird personnel, like Martinelli. I mean, they've got some weird, like Ty Berry, he's back, he's good, but Martinelli's a weird-sized guy that people have had a hard time, containing this year. Nicholson's just a big monster. He's the kind of guy that you're going to have to erase and have someone's going to have to erase him, and then you're going to have to have guards help out, that type of thing.
One thing that I thought was interesting tonight, Michigan State continues to experiment with their substitution patterns. 3 games ago, first substitutions, Holloman stayed on the court and Fears sat. That was that game in which Holloman played like 12 straight minutes and got tired in the first half. Since then, like today, first substitutions, Holloman sits, Fears stays in, Richardson comes in. Today, for the first time, Konyndyk came in at the 4. And he guarded the guy with the goggles, the 6'10" guy.
Homeschooler.
Yeah. And so it's not like they were already small.
Right.
Maybe there was a mistake and they thought they were checking out and going small. But it was only for like a minute and a half. But Carr checked in as a 4, I think with Kohler. So it's the first time they've done that. So they continue to experiment because how they substitute there has an impact on their playing groups for the rest of the first half. And they do the same thing in the second half. So they're not doing it the same way every time. They're searching for what they want to do. And Konyndyk is such an impact guy that if you start to show you're bringing him in at the 4, other teams might have to make adjustments to that.
Yeah.
So Michigan State's still trying to figure out what the best combination is, and that's an important aspect of all this. That's still under construction too.
The other thing, I mentioned Chase Richardson on defense, but he was amazing on offense. He had a really good day.
After a few games when he wasn't quite as efficient as he was earlier in the year.
Yeah, and I think that, but today he hit his stride again, and I think that maybe some of the practice. And you just wonder too, like we talk about, he wasn't very good, but you're playing 3 games and it's like a herky-jerky type of schedule with all the time off during the holidays. But I think
he played just wasn't as efficient. Like he was just stunningly efficient for the first 12 games.
And he was really good today in games, and he's feeling pretty confident out there. But as an all-around player, as a freshman, he continues to impress me. But and then Holloman did some really good things today too. You had a lot of guys play.
Second half, Holloman really, he showed some pizzazz to his game. That's that drive stop 3-pointer.
Yeah.
That's a big. That was, if you didn't know any better, you'd be like, well, who's that McDonald's
Right,
All-American?
and we saw that against North Carolina. He was amazing against North Carolina offensively. So Michigan State's got a lot of to me, I think the talk about not having a go-to guy should be over because they don't have as many limitations as they, you got to have guys that are willing to take big shots at big times.
They have guys that can handle the ball with 5 seconds. I don't mean dribble it, but can handle the situation. Right. If the ball is stuck with them, 5 seconds to go on the clock, whether it's Kohler or any of those guys in the backcourt, there's maybe not a Tyson Walker that everybody gets out of the way and let it go. But all those guys can go to an offensive move to at some point that's pretty decent. So it's if you don't have a go-to guy, it's not like you have a lot of Jamie Fikes out there. Nothing against Jamie Fikes.
And I do, yeah.
He's good as a senior. He could shoot.
He would have been fit great on this team too, man.
Yeah,
like
great.
in a
I
role.
couldn't think of anyone else.
But the thing is everyone talks about a go-to guy. I feel like if you don't have a go-to guy, then everybody else is trying to be the best version of themselves, rather than just getting out of the way for that go-to guy. And I felt like with Tyson Walker, the attitude was that Tyson Walker's got to make these plays. If he's not making them, then no one's going to. And I felt like, and I'm not saying that. I don't want to be negative on Tyson Walker. That was like the team-wide vibe. So Tyson Walker's going to get his. Everybody knows he's going to get it, and there's just more options. And it's worked well for Michigan State because there's multiple guys on the scouting report that can do different things.
And the defense now is Apawa with some rim protection. Cooper coming off the bench doing some things. Even Booker with his ability to move laterally on defense.
I'm sorry.
Gives them something in terms of some length and lateral movement. Now the bumper car still needs a lot of work, but
Booker guy was not a favorite of the alumni zone today. That play where he got the ball poked away and it was rolling down the court
for an over and back.
No, it got picked up by. He could.
If he would have touched it, would have been over and back. I took my eye off that play.
No, it wouldn't have been.
He just flat out didn't get back.
He didn't get back. He watched it, and a guy from Washington got it. I don't know. Maybe it would have been over the back. Maybe it wouldn't. But it was a close call, and he should have dove on it. And there's an audible groan, and he single-handedly during that stretch where Washington scored 7 points straight, gave up two buckets, and I was surprised that Izzo didn't pull him in that moment. But I do think the crowd was on him enough where maybe he could learn from that. But he is a guy that has got such a big upside, but he's got to get off on the Lord's bus. That he has to get on the Lord's bus.
And after that mistake, next offensive possession, he missed like a swooping, running left-handed. James Worthy, and it was.
But you can't.
He didn't make it, but it was almost a fantastic.
Okay,
shot.
I don't care. You can't. The biggest problem for anybody coming. I'm sorry for saying I don't care, but one of the biggest problems for any young player is the thought that if I do something really stupid on defense, that I can make up for it on offense. Cassius Winston was like that for 3 years, and it's infuriating.
Maybe 2.
He got 3 years, and then he really figured it out his final year. It got less and less and less.
As he in the Final Four in his third year.
I understand that it got less and less and less, but there were still some times where he had that, where he really, the first 2 years especially, where. I'm going to try to make up for it with a steal that puts me completely out of, like Brandon Dawson, the same thing. Lots of guys do it where they think that, hey, if I screw something up, I'm going to make up for it on offense. And it doesn't work that way. The basketball guys don't reward you. They reward you for floor burns, toughness, for cutouts, for making the extra pass. And Booker did a couple good things today, and he has had some good games. But in a game like this, where everyone is diving on the floor, everyone is boxing out, everyone's like
the whole team is supposed to be made that way.
Yeah, and everybody is doing the right thing, and then there's like one guy that forgets that that he's supposed to do that. it's frustrating.
I'm surprised Izzo didn't take him out.
Izzo was frustrated, but
Izzo left him out there, and he didn't even yell at him. And Izzo has been saying for the last couple of weeks that he realizes that Booker likes to be challenged, and he responds well if you get on his tail, and then he didn't get on his tail. I don't know what that's about.
Izzo's feeling the glow from the crowd, this.
He was pushing buttons. I mean, he let that go with Booker and didn't get on him for a reason. It wasn't.
But did you hear the alumni zone? How they reacted to it?
I heard the groan.
Yeah, they were groaning. It was like audible for a while. So maybe he didn't need to coach. I mean, it was like one of those deals, and I'm sure you'll hear about it in film session. But that's one of those things where people
Yet Booker can move his feet on defense.
Yeah, he can. I mean, that's the thing it's an exciting thing moving forward. But the more you can get him programmed, like before it's too late.
Yeah, and one more thing about the defense: Holloman, Akens, Fears, and Richardson, good perimeter defenders, and Zapawa, good post defense. The thing that's been good is Kohler is holding his own against mobile fours, like the guy from Ohio State. Guy from Ohio State drove on him a couple times, and they put Carr in there at the 4. Didn't really get turned. It's not. You can play Kohler and get all the rebounding from him and some low post scoring, and he's not going to hurt you much on defense against most people. Now he can't guard, the Joker.
But he can guard Dawson Garcia.
Yes, he did. Yeah, and he can guard most people at this level.
And that dude Devin Royal from Ohio State. If you went back and watched the film on what he did to Michigan State last year, I think he had 15 points, but he had a whole bunch of assists. And that's a guy that
was he a 4 last year? Because he's playing the 4 this year.
Yeah,
So Kohler being able to handle it, something I didn't know coming into the season. All those other good defenders around him. So you have good collective team defense because it's Michigan State. They're going to be in your playbook. Good coaching, all the scouting report, all that stuff. So individually, collectively really good, individually really good at pretty much all positions with some depth, and then Kohler's getting it done too.
Yeah, and it's going to help when they.
And then if you go small, Carr is getting better there, and even Booker can move his feet.
But it's going to help when they play like a Pierre Brooks type of 4. Pierre Brooks is at Butler playing the 4.
Guy from Minnesota is kind of.
No, the guy from Minnesota is different because he's 6'11".
Garcia.
I mean, and he can put the ball on the floor, and But Kohler's he's improved a lot, and Royal was a guy.
You mean like a 6'7", like a
6'7", 6'5", 6'6". Royal is a 6'5", 6'6" guy, and the thing I liked about Royal coming out of high school, and I thought he'd be a perfect fit for Michigan State. He's tough as nails, he rebounds, he's got super high basketball IQ, passes and dribbles, and the fact that Kohler they can even contemplate keeping him on the floor with a guy like that is impresses the heck out of me. So.
And we didn't know coming into this year how that was going to look.
No, but every time he's had a challenge, every time he's had a challenge, he's risen to the occasion. It's been really impressive.
And he's still getting better. He's still learning. It's the first time he's ever been like a 20-minute a night guy, and he's getting the job done. All right, a lot of basketball. Michigan State's doing some good stuff. Number 16 team in the country. Fans are excited. Got Northwestern this weekend. And then I can't remember what's after that, but then a week Penn State, and then a week from Sunday, Illinois is coming in here.
Yeah.
So we'll see what they got. A lot of people talking Illinois up.
I feel
they got some good individual talent.
Truthfully, from the teams that I've seen, I would say Michigan State, Illinois.
Indiana's good all of a sudden.
Indiana's got talent. Indiana's the most talented team in the Big Ten. I'm not sure.
Was it Renault got hurt? Now they're better.
Listen, I'm not sure if they're good.
They've been playing good for about 5 days now.
Yeah, I know. And as soon as Ballo has 25 points, everyone forgets that he can't play ball screen defense. So.
He posts up nicely early, though, man. You got to get back. Yeah, they do some things.
They do, and they've
on a given day they can be really good.
They've got a ton of talent, but I'm just saying in terms of teams playing the best basketball, like consistently throughout the course of the season, Michigan State, Michigan is going to be a handful. Illinois, Illinois they shoot a ton of threes. But Oregon, they look good at times. I don't know, but I think Michigan State's one of the most consistent teams in the Big Ten that I've seen. In terms of their personnel, they don't have that many holes. I'll believe Indiana when I see it because they're just, they're kind of fool's gold to me.
All right, I don't have my Chopin reader. I looked up my phone and it disappeared, so we'll get to that next time. But everybody knows the score on that one. We'll get back to that next time. For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast from East Lansing with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com. Chopin Recycling.